Okay, there are maybe like 3 or 4 actors in Hollywood right now who I will watch in anything because I just have implicit faith in the choices that they make. Kristen Stewart is one of those actors. She's got a new movie out. Today on the podcast, while the internet can't stop talking about Love, Lies, Bleeding. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Look, this is the group chat. The group chat is here. It's our end of week group chat. And on this day, we gather our favorite cultural thinkers and we sit and we talk about the big stories around here. And this week we have Susie Exposito is here, Christy Puchko is here, Nico Stratus is here, and it's going to be a great time. Welcome, everybody. How's everyone feeling?
Hi.
Fabulous.
Good.
This is good. Listen, we have a lot to talk about. I want to get to Kristen Stewart, but before we get cooking, I should just tell people that a little bit later in the show, I want to talk about this story about how several dozen artists have dropped out of this big South by Southwest festival in Austin. I think that story is worth talking about, but we'll get to that in a second. That is not where we're starting, okay? We are starting about a movie that some of us around the table are already calling the best movie of 2024.
That's me.
You're looking pretty good in there.
It might also be me.
Yeah? You got some pretty serious
Probably
names
me.
going.
Jackie! There you are. Ladies. That's all right with you, Lou? Hey, wanna go grab a drink right now if you wanna come with us?
Thanks, I'm good here.
Babe, you know Lou here is a grade A dyke, right?
Says so.
That is a scene from the new movie Love, Lies, Bleeding. What I liked about this is that I introduced the clip and said some people are calling it the best movie of 2024, and I could hear Christy and Nico being like, "That's me. I'm doing that." Before we even heard the clip, which I love. But let's tell people what this movie is. It is a crime thriller. It is set in the late 80s. It tells the story of a boxing gym manager played by Kristen Stewart, and she falls in love with a bodybuilder played by Katie O'Brien. Christy, in your review for Mashable, you call Love, Lies, Bleeding a, quote, gnarly masterpiece and one of the best films of the year. Girl, it is March. You know what I mean? What did you love What did you love so much about this movie?
I will say, I know people get exhausted when they're like, the Oscars just happened and already you're being like, best movie of the year. I will say this. I've covered Sundance and South by, so at this point, I've seen way more movies than your average, even your
You've
like,
seen the year's worth
vote.
of movies already. Like the movies are going to come out for the rest of the year, but yes.
Literally saw 36 out of South by. Like, I'm a monster. So like this means something when I'm like telling you right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, this movie, it's partially like Rose Glass, who co-wrote and directed it. She made Saint Maud. And if you haven't seen Saint Maud, seek it out immediately. It's so upsetting and I love it so much. But this is like, what she does with Love, Lies, Bleeding, like it got buzz out of Sundance. And like, I was jealous of every single person at Sundance that got to see it because I did not. I had to wait a little bit. But like, it's this like immersive thriller. Like I love thrillers because there are certain thrillers I will watch over and over again. And first context, Zodiac and Prisoners. I like my thrillers. I like them upsetting.
Out of all choices. Okay. All right.
I
go
know.
off. Yeah.
I know. I have people in my family that are like, you should see somebody.
Zodiac over and over again? Okay.
Exactly. Because like, here's the thing. Those movies like suck you in so full bodied that like, nothing can distract me. For the runtime of that movie, I am here. And in Love, Lies, Bleeding, I am in a gross, sweaty desert where everything is covered in dust and probably some dried blood. And I'm like into it. Like the performances in this are so terrific, but the whole thing is so immersive. Like even the sound design is upsetting. It's a lot of squelching. It's a lot of wet sounds in every way you can imagine.
Yes.
And like, it sucks you in. It's impossible to just like, this is not the kind of movie that you like do laundry while watching. This is the kind of movie
There's
that
no
you just,
second screen experience with this movie.
No, you just surrender yourself. Like let yourself get into it. And I just love how it sucks you in. And like as someone who watches a lot of movies, like they don't all do this.
No, of course. Well, let me tell people at home, listening at home in the radio, that you said there's a lot of wet sounds, and both Susie and Nico went, yes, there are. 100% there are. Nico, let's talk about this movie. You saw it last night. How did you feel coming out of the theater?
Oh, I mean this with all respect. You know how you can smell it? You know how you can like smell a movie sometimes when you're like the whole time you're just like, oh, like this is like all of my senses have been activated in ways I'm not like I was never fully aware of. Like I sort of had that feeling like I wasn't sure what to expect. I like to go into movies like this without knowing too much about it. I didn't even know it was like when the A24. I was like, oh, this is this is different than what I thought it was. Because someone's like, oh, like gay Kristen Stewart movie.
Yeah.
That was enough to get me into the theater. And
Yes.
then all of a sudden, I'm in this world, and I'm just like, wait, what is happening to me right now? And as soon as I left, I was like, man, I can't wait to see that again, and I can't wait to see what this movie gets paired with, like when it moves around, and like because I feel like this is one of those movies that people are going to talk about like for days and months and weeks to come, and like it's going to be in conversation with other films, and like I don't know, there was just so much going on, and the whole time I was just like, it's like dirt that you can't scrape off that you don't really want to. You're like you want to have this mark forever of like this is where I've been and I'm different now.
I love grime. The movie has grime and it comes with you.
I love this bursting of energy. First of all, we have people come on the show and talk about movies all the time. They rarely feel so inspired to get this descriptive, and it's because sometimes a movie, sort of acts, it asks all those things of you. Susie, on social media, you called Love Lies Bleeding messy and ridiculous, and the ending was a total head scratcher. That's great queer art. Unpack all of that for me, if you don't mind.
Where do I even start? I think Love Lies Bleeding is a great take on like the pulp fiction genre.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be exaggerated and ridiculous by nature. People read pulp novels in the 1950s to be titillated by this like social underworld and its inhabitants.
Yeah.
Right. So like I think great queer art is, provocative and it's supposed to be a little campy to use the Susan Sontag definition. It's a mode of seduction. It's flamboyant, and like I think this movie really ticks off all the boxes. And it's very fleshy, everything. It's got this
these words.
Everything
grimy,
about it is actually very
fleshy. Okay,
grimy.
continue. Yeah.
Cold-blooded, because like their love, I think in a lot of like sapphic films, like women use each other as conduits of like self-discovery. They're looking for the person to complete them or to define them. We don't really get that here. We get two women who really just look to each other to fulfill some kind of like, very cold-blooded need. Whether it's lust or revenge.
I
that's a good pulp novel.
I love all these descriptions we're using, but also I think the word lust is kind of missing a lot from cinema right now, Christy. Like there's something about this. Let's just go ahead and call it like a relatively sexless moment in cinema. Like we don't really get a lot of great sex movies the way that we maybe used to in the 90s and the early 2000s. I think it's easy to romanticize that period of time because we had a lot of that. But also it seems like this movie, like there's a lot of conversations about the very intense sort of sex scenes between Katie and Kristen Stewart here. But as you noted in your review, like the way that sex is depicted in this movie is itself worth talking about. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
100%. I want to say, first off, hot take, it's superhero movies that are to blame for everything being really tame now.
Yes.
I mean, it is, because everybody, like, they want to make a movie that, like, is going to be a 4-quadrant movie, and you don't want to upset people, so you can't have sex. And
4-quadrant as in
Roadhouse
demographics. It's going to hit all the demographics. But yes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, movies shouldn't, like, every movie doesn't need to be for everyone. This movie is very sexual, but without, like, Kristen Stewart keeps saying in interviews, like, but you don't see anything, which one is not true. First of all, for the fans out there, it's not true. You see things. But two, it's less about like what's happening on screen and more kind of like how it's happening. And like this and All of Us Strangers, which is another gay romance movie, it's the scenes building up to actual sex. It's like the groping. It's like there's a scene in this where you see panties get pulled off, and like that stuff that is like less elegant, like that Erica Young type stuff, like that's what makes this movie so exciting, because it's not pandering to this male gaze or this like romantic idea of girl on girl action where everyone looks like a runway model who is like, maybe my mom does this thing where she says women don't sweat, they glisten. And I've always hated that because I'm like, no, I sweat. This movie sweats. Like, this is women. This is carnal. This is, there's stuff that happens in this movie that is like, the desire is radiant, but it's not glossy. And like, that's what makes it so exciting. Like, it really does feel like you're being led into a moment that's not just intimate, it's like carnal.
Nico, can we talk a little bit about Kristen Stewart at the center of all of this? I think like Kristen Stewart to me is one of the great evolution stories of Hollywood in the last 15 years or so. Just because like we get sort of the world gets introduced to Kristen Stewart as Bella in the Twilight series, and you kind of go like, no one seems to want to be in these movies. You know, they keep making them. There's 4 of them. I'm not sure that she's wanted to be on set for any of these. But then she kind of like moves, you know, further and further away from that legacy and into more and more risk-taking. Not necessarily risque movies, but just like more and more risk-taking in terms of the performances that she takes on. What do you think this movie, Love Lies Bleeding, represents in the grand oeuvre, you know, of Kristen Stewart and where we arrived at?
I mean, I like this idea of these people that we sort of see as these singular creations of these big franchise movies. You know, like this is like the thing with Daniel Radcliffe. I was like struggling to remember who played Harry Potter because how long it's been.
It's early. I get it. Yes.
But I like seeing like, okay, like I have been the figurehead of this thing. Like Elijah Wood did this too, right? Where it's like, okay, I've been seen as the figurehead of this massive franchise.
Sure.
So what am I going to do to sort of grime up? Like we've used a lot of texture words, and I think that's really like integral to like this part of Kristen Stewart's career, which is like, I need some texture and I need some grit. And like part of it is like she is very publicly embracing her queer lifestyle, like her queer life now. You know, we've got the Rolling Stone cover. We have all this stuff where she's like, okay, I want to actually explore this truth of myself. Because when she was younger, you know, talking about the sexless nature of film and stuff now, you know, when she was younger, she was so sort of forced into this very safe world of like aspirational heterosexuality. And now sort of she gets to grow beyond that, right? And like discover where her boundaries are and discover how far from them she can go. With also having the cachet of being like a major movie star. And I think that's a really interesting thing to do. And I'm really curious to see what follows that, right? Because if you make that path, who else is going to get to be able to follow you down that and start to make art in this, like in this world that she is sort of opening up? And I think that's a really interesting thing.
Susie, let's talk about it. Let's talk about this moment in the be gay, do crime sort of arc of Kristen Stewart. Where do you think she goes from here?
Oh, wow. Her trajectory, you know, I do adore K-Stu. I do. I have to say, I feel like her emotive range as an actor, I can't say it's very broad. I think she's really like nailed the
she does 2 things really, really well. You know, it's not, she doesn't do many things. Yeah, the brooding thing. Yes, 100%. Yeah. She has really nailed that. But you know, I have to say, like, I really like the dimensions of like the character she's playing. Can I tell much of the difference between this character in Love Lies Bleeding and her playing Joan Jett in The Runaways? I don't know. But at the same time, I mean, it's like her, the characters she's choosing though are all like very interesting and compelling. I think this is a triumph for her, if only because she finally gets to play with a story that's like captivating. Or not, I won't say finally, but I think she's been really good at choosing roles. You know, I mean, even like seeing her playing Princess Diana was interesting. Yeah, in Spencer, that was a really compelling performance for sure. And that was entirely all brooding, like the thing that you just mentioned.
It was,
but it works so well because that's the thing that she sort of most excels at, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. If folks are just joining us, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and you're listening to the Commotion group chat. My guests today are Susie Exposito, Nico Stratus, and Christy Puchko. We are now going to switch gears to talking about this. All right, so what you just heard is from Belfast, Northern Ireland. That is the rap trio Kneecap. They were scheduled to play the South by Southwest Festival this week. South by is the biggest annual music conference in North America. It's a huge deal. But this year, artists like Kneecap are dropping out after learning of the festival's that one of the festival sponsors is the U.S. military and a bunch of defense contractors, and it's because of the military support of Israel. Artists don't want to play. In all, 80 acts have dropped out of the festival. Nico, all these artists are relatively under the radar. I'm interested in this. You know, these are not like Black Keys level headliners we're talking about. What makes their actions significant to you, do you think, in the grand scheme of things?
I mean, these are people. This is, this morning before we started this conversation, there's word going around of Renee Rapp sort of taking her time on the GLAAD stage to talk about the ongoing war. And there's people that have something to lose in their careers that are taking this opportunity to stand in solidarity, to speak up, to say something. And I think that's a really important thing to take notice of. We talk about it's not the Black Keys or whatever. Like the Black Keys have nothing to lose. They've made all their money. They've made 1,000 Ford Escape commercials and they've got that money. There's really nothing that they can lose. And really, they're never going to do this. They're never going to be making those actions. But these artists that do have something, South by Southwest is, some people might look at it as an arts and music festival, but it is a networking event. It is an industry trade show. It is all these things. And these artists, talking about the Irish artists, every artist from Ireland canceled on going to the festival. And this is, there's a lot of financial risk to that. There's a lot of time and energy, and there's a career opportunities lost. And to make this stand in solidarity with all those things to lose, I think is a really important action. And I think ultimately this is the thing that's going to draw a lot of attention to this, right? Is like, it's not the Black Keys. We don't need necessarily, like, it would be nice, but they've never been that band, but all of these artists that are doing it in detriment to their own career growth, I think is a really important and really, interesting thing to take note of.
Nico, when I'm lying in my bed tonight, before I go to sleep, I'm going to lose sleep over the fact that you said they've made 1,000 Ford Escape commercials. That's going to stay with me for a real long time. Christy, you were just in Austin for the film component of South by Southwest. This happens before the bands arrive in Austin. Were you hearing any conversations about the sponsorships at this festival?
It's kind of hard if you haven't been to Austin. It's kind of hard to picture that festival. I will say I didn't hear anything about it until I started reading the news.
Yeah,
like the film section goes into the music section, but when I was still on the ground, this conversation was not being had there. And what's interesting is that I think it's really important that the musicians are bringing up this topic, because like the film festival part, there are sponsors, but like unlike a lot of other film festivals I've been to, including Toronto's International Film Festival, the sponsorship stuff was not something I was very aware of at the festival. Like at TIFF, famously, there's a Bulgari ad with Zendaya and Anne Hathaway, and it is so well known that people in the audience clap along.
Yeah, people are like, "Oh, we know this beat."
Here it comes.
I
Here's
know
the Bulgari
exactly.
ad. Yeah, like that's not a thing in Austin. And so like I didn't know. I mean, I didn't if I had seen those letters from the what do you call it, the defense contractors, I wouldn't even know when that was. I was very aware that C4 is a sponsor because there are people handing out, those are energy drinks. Ironically, those were being handed out everywhere.
Not the bombs, guys.
It's kind of the only sponsor. Yeah. It's not. It's C4. It's an energy drink.
Sure.
Okay. But yeah, it's interesting because I do think the fact to underline Nico's point, I think the fact that you have all these artists talking about this, like I think it's something that was totally going under the radar until the boycott started happening.
In response to bands dropping out, the Republican governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, he sent out this message on social media that basically said, don't come back. The festival then issued this response. They said they disagree with the governor, that they respect the artist's right to protest. But then they also kind of doubled down on their commitment to military sponsorships. And this is the quote. I'm going to read you guys the quote from the festival. They said, "The defense industry has historically been a proving ground for many of the systems we rely on today. These institutions are often leaders in emerging technologies, and we believe it's better to understand how their approach will impact our lives." Susie, it is true that the U.S. military, I don't know, gave us like microwaves and GPSs or whatever, but you didn't have to tweet it. You know what I mean? What did you make of the statement that the South by put out?
I wish they would just, we know they don't regret this decision. They wouldn't have made it. Like, making a statement to me is just so pointless. And I think they should have known that they would be at odds with a large swath of the creative community on this. Like the anti-war movement, it's a great American tradition. It's something that we have that's kind of like fallen off a little bit, I mean, since but it's like it's being revitalized right now. There are,
and artists have historically been a part of those movements when they do happen.
Artists have been essential to the American anti-war movement. And they're just, honestly, it heartens me to see people like be like, hey, not everything is about selling things anymore. It's good to see indie artists, put their careers on the line to really exercise their free speech, but also like to show a moral compass. I think that's a great American tradition that I think the organizers of South by really underestimated the fact that there is an anti-war movement that's still alive and kicking.
Nico, in the great struggle between art and commerce, I would have, if you were keeping track, you would say it's like 1 million for commerce, like 1 for art. Like the battle is, art is losing that particular battle.
Commerce is doing well.
Commerce is doing all right when we sort of compare those two. But what do you make of that festival's response? Because they are clearly trying to maintain that relationship with their sponsors, whatever their sponsors might be, because again, in the struggle between art and commerce, one of those is not doing great on its own.
I think a lot about an old Mike Birbiglia joke, which I know is very left field from what we're talking about, but he has this bit where he says, "What I should have said was nothing." In like very much what they should have said. I mean, they started great when they were like, hey, we disagree with Governor Abbott. We think that artists have a right to their free speech. That was a great statement. They could have ended there. And instead, following it down this path to like, but hold on, what about all the good things that Raytheon has done for us? Like, draw me a picture of all the good things that Raytheon has ultimately done for humankind, because, a lot of people are struggling to house and feed themselves. And I don't think, the technology developed by Raytheon to, drop bombs that we're seeing they talk a lot about like we need to understand the effects of these technologies. Like we see the effects of these technologies every day.
Do.
Yeah.
That's the reason why people are not going to your festival, because the people that developed those things are also there recruiting, or they've got whatever. Like, I mean, obviously I haven't been there. I also think it's really interesting and kind of ironic that the television series Fallout, which is starting in April, has a big setup at South by Southwest. Fallout being a series that is about the folly of American warfare. So it is a very interesting juxtaposition. And like, we know that South by is going to take that money. So they should have just like left that part of it out. You don't need to, we know you're going to take this money, like to try to justify it in this way where like the benefit of having defense contractors there is like, it outweighs the bad outweighs the good or whatever. It's just like, it's such a bad move. And I think this is a statement that's really going to haunt them for a long time to come. And I'm curious to see how they pivot from here.
I'm going to leave it there, and then you guys are going to get so mad at me because before we go, we got to do one thing. I want to play you guys this clip.
So if I get jealous, I can't help it. I want every bit of you. I guess I'm selfish.
I regret to inform you that before we go, you guys have to pontificate on Justin Timberlake, who's got a new record out. That's his new song, Selfish. The album is called Everything I Thought It Was. I'm interested in Justin Timberlake, but also we have literally 1 minute to do this. 30 seconds to each of you. Susie, do you see this moment turning around Justin Timberlake's fortunes since he's fallen out of favor, do you think?
I don't know. He pulled out all the stops. He brought Timbaland back for this like funky new disco
that might do
reprise.
It, man. I don't know. That might do it.
That might do it. Bringing back Timbaland, bringing back NSYNC. I think he's trying to remind people why they fell in love with him in the first place. Yeah. But he has some splaining to do. I think.
Christy, last word to you on this. Do you see this being the turning point in Justin Timberlake's career? Is he going to be back in our good graces?
No. I will say this. I will say this. I listened to the album this morning for you.
Thank you.
For this.
I appreciate you.
You're welcome. I've also listened to the audiobook that Britney Spears put out, and I'm just gonna say, listen to Michelle Williams. It's a more sustaining thing. And like truly though, this album, like the beats are delightful. Like if I'm not listening to the lyrics, it's fine. The lyrics are hilarious.
Well, all right.
So many times I was just like, Mm.
You know what? Thank you for putting it very succinctly. We have to leave it there. I'm so sorry to cut you guys off. Susie Exposito, Christy Puchko, Nico Stratus, thank you for being here. Thank you for your time and for your wonderful insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And listen, that is it for the podcast. My name is Elamin. We are going to be back next week. I would love to see you then if you're around. I don't know. Want to hang out? Let's do it.